Honestly, though I didn't see it at the time, my last Linux VR video, despite performing really well, was incomplete because I completely skimmed over the most Linuxy, and by that I mean open source, VR thing there is, Monado. And with it, WiVRn for Quest streaming. Not today. This is fully open source, except for the Quest VR streaming. For those who've never heard of it before, what is Monado? Well, basically, it's SteamVR but FOSS. I mean, not quite, the mentality's a little bit different, but that's the 3-word summary. Basically, not every game wants to have to support every headset manually, so OpenXR is a standard that headsets and games can use to talk to each other, and OpenXR runtime is a piece of software that goes in the middle that implements either side of that standard that allows the games to talk to the headsets. That is what Monado is, and that's what SteamVR is. However, SteamVR is a bunch of utilities on top of that, like a launcher, an input editor, and an overlay for your desktop. Monado is none of those things. That's not to say you can't have them, but it works in much the same way as that a Linux window manager only implements managing windows, but you still have a bar at the top and an app launcher and everything like that. It's just you do them by separately installing Wofi and WiVRn and that kind of thing. Adding layers on top is how you get a full SteamVR replacement. Monado just makes the games come on the headset. But before we get to any Monado specifics or game specifics or anything like that, any setup, we need to talk about what WiVRn actually is, how it differs from ALVR, and some potential bias here, since you know I've talked about, or you probably know, I've talked about ALVR in the past. ALVR is to SteamVR what WiVRn is to Monado. It's a Quest streaming up, standalone headset streaming app on top of that respective OpenXR runtime. ALVR will also get its own updated video, but that's gonna come out after the ALVR full Steam release happens, so it's kind of a nice thing to line up with. So obviously, like I said, you know that I've got a history, but also, this is a Quest 3S, and ALVR paid for it. It's not a secret why, it's perfectly public, it's on their open collective page, but we're going to pretend it's a little secret why that you'll find out when the ALVR Steam trailer comes out. Obviously, I really, really appreciate that, but also, I talked to the ALVR devs about doing WiVRn videos about it with this headset beforehand. They've also said, it's all fine. So although I don't intend it to bias me, and although I really, really appreciate this from ALVR, you also have to see how it would sound really bad if I didn't tell you about it, so I'm telling you about that right now. It shouldn't colour my ALVR impressions. Just remember, whenever you hear anything about ALVR from me, even if it was to do a specific thing for them with it, they did buy me a headset, and that's a factor you should know, even if I don't intend it to bias me. And the third thing, kind of less of a deep topic, is just that ALVR and WiVRn have different ideologies. ALVR is great and I love tinkering with it. It allows you to get things set up exactly how you would like to. There are pages and pages of settings that are really useful. However, that does mean it can be kind of daunting for regular people, and there are presets to kind of help you get up and going, but it's also definitely possible to ruin your experience with broken settings. WiVRn, on the other hand, tries to make things as minimally configurable as possible and have everything that might otherwise be configurable just work magically. And I will say, that tends to work well. We'll get more to that once I actually talk about running it. That generally works, but I will admit I am biased towards the more tinkery philosophy, even if it's cool seeing a potential option in WiVRn just turn into some magic feature that works perfectly, which we will also get to later. So we'll start with the setup options. It's kind of interesting that WiVRn lets you configure some settings on the headset, like permissions, resolution, and refresh rate, and then some you do on the computer, mainly focusing on the encoder. That's kind of cool in the sense that with settings being stored on the headset, I could bring a headset over to a friend's computer and it would know the resolution and refresh rate that I want to use, but it's kind of awkward in the much more likely scenario that you've just got two computers and you want to use your headset with both of them, like a laptop and a desktop, and one of those is probably going to be way more powerful than the other. It's actually kind of awkward, where if the computer was storing the resolution and refresh rate info, the computer could say, I'm the powerful one, headset, go to 120 Hz, 1.7 times scaling, and then the opposite for the less powerful one. one. We can't do that if they're stored on the headset, so you are going to have to manually change resolution and refresh rate from the headset wherever it's necessary. But even though that's awkward, it's also true that it's probably going to be much more convenient to change the resolution and refresh rate directly from the headset, since otherwise, if you were to change it from the dashboard app on the computer, you would either need to take the headset off or be able to use like a desktop view in VR and edit it that way. If it's just part of the headset app, that could be quicker, so there are trade-offs. Something that you do configure from the computer, and that's really cool, is the ability to use multiple encoders in parallel to speed up both encoding and decoding. The way it speeds up decoding is kind of interesting. The theory behind it is, well, if I have two encoders and one can be done before the other, yes, the headset is still going to have to decode the whole frame in the end, so how's it going to be faster? Well, we can send the first chunk that is encoded to the headset before the other chunk is even done, and the headset can start decoding before it normally would have been able to. And I think it's actually the default now in some configurations. I'm not sure. I started before it was the default, but 3 encoders is the recommended configuration normally. It works great with my AMD GPU through VAPI. However, on my laptop's GTX 1060, I did have green lines between things, so that might be an issue for you. Speaking of VAPI and NVENC though, you can also pick between those, X264, and Vulkan video encode, which is really cool, and hopefully eventually just becomes the only video encoding choice we need, because then that should just work with any graphics card, any platform. Vulkan in general is amazing, so Vulkan video encode sounds awesome, but it's still in experimental stages right now, and I haven't used it yet, so I can't vouch for whether it's good yet. I just hope it grows to become the default. Given I've just been listing the settings, and the fact that I'm done listing the settings now, as I said before, and as the main developer has said on Discord, the goal of WiVRn is to be something that works, not something that you can make work. And generally, ALVR will work out of the box in the same way WiVRn would. But WiVRn just really wants to have like one main setup that mostly works, and then you can customize the bits that really do need customizing, like the bitrate. But one thing that I wouldn't change is that WiVRn recently got support for encryption, which is just really cool. Like, it's probably not going to matter for you the vast majority of the time, but it's just a good thing to have, and there's basically no overhead to doing it, so why not have it? However, I can't test that too much, other than to say that it seems to work, and I can show you the little GUI. You have to enter a pin, and there's one shown on your computer to handle setting up encryption stuff, but the merge request that added it only just got merged into the main branch, so it's not in a release yet. Now for actually using it. If you've got any random OpenXR app, be that directly or through Steam, running on your host, not through a Flatpak, WiVRn should just pick it up. And if it doesn't, you can add this launch option, or probably actually check WiVRn, because that should have some more up-to-date things. This also depends on your installation method. I don't need it. I'm not sure if Envision messed with some stuff, and even though I'm back on the Flatpak, that's messed with things. I'm really not sure, but just add that launch option if things aren't working. WiVRn should just pick things up immediately. If you're a fan of Flatpaks and want to run your OpenXR apps within a sandbox, you're actually still completely in luck, which is a really nice benefit of this over the ALVR Flatpak. I will say it's probably somehow possible to do this with the ALVR Flatpak, and it's not ALVR's fault, it's probably SteamVR being awkward. It's just I've never seen someone manage to do it, and I've not managed to myself, whereas with WiVRn it was very easy. All you have to do is add a few permissions to whatever Flatpak is running the OpenXR app, and then WiVRn can just access it directly like it normally would. I've tested that myself with Vivecraft running through Prism Launcher, though Vivecraft has its own separate issues, but it runs, and that's what's important here. Godot for doing some OpenXR overlay experiments, and the Steam Flatpak itself for running Steam games. There are some potential compatibility issues, sometimes with OpenXR things, but more likely OpenVR things, because where ALVR is based on SteamVR, which directly is the OpenVR standard and also implements OpenXR, Monado just implements OpenXR. So you need a translation layer, OpenComposite, to turn OpenVR into OpenXR. And OpenComposite is great and works really well, but there are still some compatibility issues, in the same way that Wine is a translation layer and it's just not quite perfect. But if you have any issues with it, or with any of these projects, be it ones in future videos like ALVR or WiVRn, Monado, WLX Overlay, any projects mentioned in my videos that are open source, if you can program, you can always help for them and they would always greatly appreciate it. Let it be known though that if you would like to use a mix of WiVRn for games that work with it and ALVR for ones that only work on SteamVR, that could be slightly awkward, because even though in theory WiVRn should always replace the active runtime file with its when it's running, and it does tend to, and SteamVR should do the same, which it used to, my SteamVR just doesn't feel like that right now. If that happens to you and you're running the Steam Flatpak with SteamVR, you can always go into the sandbox and take its .config/OpenXR/active runtime.json file and copy it into your user's equivalent directory outside of the sandbox, which, if you remember, Steam should have access to because you gave it access if you're using WiVRn. That is some awkward file magic to do, but it should make things work, and if you would really like to be switching between the two constantly, you can. Hopefully you just don't have this issue and it's just a weird me thing, because I didn't used to have this issue. But if you do, that's how you solve it. Smoothness, consistency, jitteriness, it's all slightly worse than ALVR for me. We'll get to how it can be different for some people. But that has just been my experience. Running at as like-for-like settings as possible, I don't have as smooth a time as ALVR. However, it's still perfectly solid, and very recently got massively improved. So if you've used WiVRn in the past and thought, bit too hitchy for me, try it again now. It's a lot better. But what actually would cause differences in smoothness between WiVRn and ALVR? Well, despite Valve being a very open source friendly company, SteamVR is still proprietary. So WiVRn can do a lot more to first just understand how Monado works, but also integrate more closely with it. If Monado had an issue that was affecting WiVRn, WiVRn can change it, or there will just be more tools available for WiVRn to integrate more closely with Monado. And I'm not gonna pretend that I understand exactly how all of this works. I don't write WiVRn. However, I can say that, myself included in the past, not really anymore, many people have been plagued by reprojection issues on SteamVR forever on Linux, so I'm willing to believe that that's how things work, and it makes sense. Despite my own experience of ALVR and WiVRn being quite close, but ALVR generally being smoother and feeling nicer, people in my Discord server have said the exact opposite, and you should know that too, because you could be either of us. My theory, given so many SteamVR Linux issues revolve around reprojection, is that I will only play games either at a low enough resolution or graphics settings, or I will only play games that I can get a consistent 120 Hz at. I never want my render time to be above 8.3 milliseconds no matter what, or it's just going to be a bad time for me. But because of that, I end up compromising on visual quality and basically never having the rendering of a game itself stutter. If reprojection is somehow people's issue and WiVRn is handling that better, well, I'm never having to deal with that because there are no missed frames. To test that theory, I decided to ask the person who'd reported WiVRn being much better for them if their hardware was really low end, and that's not the case. They have a 6700 XT and a Ryzen 5600, that is all good. However, VR chat players who are constantly stuck at 30 FPS, that might be something to take into account. It's just not something that I do very often, and that might be why our experiences differ. Another place that they differ, but well into WiVRn's favour, is foveated encoding. I then went on to say a bunch of things that just weren't true and that I wrote down a while ago, but I still stand by that WiVRn seems to more smoothly go between, slightly foveated and very low resolution at the edges, whereas ALVR does still seem to do that, but a bit more harshly and in more clear steps. As for features, WiVRn does support hand tracking, face tracking, eye tracking, if your headset supports it, and it has a pass-through little environment before you're connected to the computer, but it doesn't seem to support, at least right now, the Quest standalone magic body tracking, setting positional offsets, emulating different controllers, generally getting in deep and customizing things. WiVRn doesn't have that going for it. Before we get to the installation, I want to ask for your patience because I've never done this before, so forgive me if it's awkward. We're going to see how this goes. Before I ever got the 3S from ALVR, a company called AMVR reached out to me and asked if I wanted to try some Quest 2 accessories. The deal was I don't get paid money, but they send me free things, and I can choose to talk about them in a video if I like them. They did end up sending me extra stuff for the 3S after getting it, but originally I would not put, by the way, I got a free headset and I got free headset things in the same video. It's just, this was already lined up, and I would like to see how this goes for me, for you, and for the company sending them. They asked me what things I specifically wanted, and I picked out the things that I thought I would actually like, and I'm only telling you things that I actually like. I have been using them for the last little while, so I've not just been given like a pile of things to throw at you whether I like them or not. So we'll continue and see how it goes. Firstly, they sent me these controller straps for the Quest 3S. They do bigger ones which look more directly like Valve Index controllers, but these fit my hands well, and so I prefer these because they give the controller overall less mass than if you had something sticking at the bottom. I really especially like them for Beat Saber. I've always had straps of this style, but previously I'd had ones that kind of attached with like rubber bands almost, so it's nice to have a sheath that goes along the whole controller and it's generally more grippy. I really like it for Beat Saber over using the lanyards built in because I understand that I'm never going to be letting go of the saber in Beat Saber, but I just prefer it feeling like the controller is more tightly attached to my hands, so I'm a really big fan of these. They are great. Next, also for the 3S, they sent a facial interface. My main commentary on this is that I'm switching from a Quest 2 VR cover, and this feels very similar, so I'm perfectly happy with how it feels. They have one with a thicker forehead for people who normally wear an Elite strap or a normal soft strap. I plan on getting an Elite strap for this soon, but they also do one with a thinner forehead bit for if you prefer a Halo strap, and if you would like a cheaper way to still make sure that your headset doesn't absorb any sweat, they do a little silicone cover that goes around the stock interface too. Penultimately, there is an 8000 mAh wearable power bank. I thought that this would be super light and I could wear it basically all the time no matter what, and it's just a bunch more battery life. And it is a bunch more battery life, but it's also heavier than I originally thought it would be. It's not probably something you would want to wear for Expert Plus Beat Saber or like, you know, like Fitbeat songs where you're going to be moving around a lot. However, for an FPS game like Half-Life Alyx, maybe not Boneworks, but for Half-Life Alyx, where you are going to do some crouching and moving around, but generally it's mostly standing, this is perfectly good and a nice way to get some more battery without having it be on the back of your head. So I like this as well. Though, just make sure you actually use the in port and the out port. I didn't notice there were two ports at first, and I was wondering why my headset was charging the power bank, so make sure you read the manual on that. And finally, even though I don't wear glasses, I share my headset sometimes with somebody who does, so AMVR sells some little rubber bumpers. They have a few different heights of them, I guess depending on the thickness of your glasses, so even if the glasses bump against that, they're not going to bump against the lenses. At first I kind of thought, why not just basically have screen protectors for the lenses, but I can see how that could be awkward because the lenses are only plastic, so if you scratch them getting it on or off, and it could affect it optically, so fair enough. Rubber rings around the edge. They work perfectly fine. They're actually shockingly good. They attach shockingly well, and just help make sure your lenses don't get scratched if you wear glasses or if you share your headset with someone who wears glasses. Please be as real as you would like to in the comments. Was this amazing and a really good way of working with a company, or did I approach it all wrong? I want to make sure that my videos remain good, but when companies come and approach me, obviously I would like to take those opportunities when it's available, and I have liked the things I've gotten here, genuinely. So let me know what you thought in the comments, and now back to the video. Thanks AMVR for the accessories. If you now think you'd like to install it, I'm going to strongly suggest that on the server side, on the PC, you use a Flatpak. And the main developer, I'm sorry, I pronounce it badly, the main developer is going to at least hint that you probably shouldn't use a Flatpak, which we'll get to, but as for my reasons that I think a Flatpak is great, the first is obviously just convenience. It's just way easier. It comes packaged with Open Composite, which is that translation layer we mentioned earlier, and otherwise you might have to set that up separately, but then there are other reasons why you might not have to. It depends on the exact setup you're using. The Flatpak just comes with everything bundled together, and that's really nice. And the second reason just is inherent to the fact that it's a Flatpak. It's sandboxed. There are definitely flaws in the Flatpak system, but it's a great extra layer of just safety, and not even safety because you can generally trust most projects that you use aren't going to become malware. Same goes with WiVRn, same goes with ALVR, same goes with anything else. But it's nice to think that if somehow the repo were compromised or some vulnerability was found in it, Flatpak is doing something to limit its access, and that's just nice. WiVRn's actually done a really good job of taking good advantage of the Flatpak sandbox lately for a few reasons. The first is that it used to require permission to run arbitrary commands on your host for the purpose of launching an overlay whenever you start VR, which, as we discussed before, is kind of necessary if you want a SteamVR style experience. The problem with that is that being able to run arbitrary commands kind of negates any of the other sandboxing that you do. So I was just working with that permission refused, and I just couldn't have automatic overlay launching. However, I went to ZTOVL, and I wanted a config option. Like in the dashboard, you could tick, I want this to go in the sandbox, or I don't want it to go in the sandbox. Because I would really like to be able to run WLX overlay just directly in the WiVRn Flatpak. However, ZTOVL went and did me one better and had it check automatically. Like WiVRn looks at its own Flatpak permissions and it sees, okay, if I can run commands on the host, I'll run it on the host, but if not, I will still try to run it in the sandbox. That is great, and it's just another example of WiVRn being so careful with the settings that are added. The second thing has nothing at all to do with me, though I would have suggested it if it hadn't already been in the works, and that's the fact that typically WiVRn uses Avahi to announce its presence. So like on the PC, it will kind of shout out on your network, "Hi, I'm here," so the Quest or whatever other headset you're using can see it. But because it's not like a custom thing programmed by WiVRn, it's just using Avahi, which is a standard thing. You need to have Avahi also installed next to WiVRn for that to work. And if you don't have it, it used to just not launch, which probably for most people is fine, but I would like to not have Avahi on my computer, and generally I would like to minimize the permissions needed, and WiVRn currently has permission to talk on the Avahi socket. And the solution this time was to add a setting, but not to the dashboard or the config file. You just run it with -- no publish service, and then it won't check for Avahi, and you can then remove that from its Flatpak permissions, and it's got 2 less in total permissions than it had at the start. Something I only just learned about, but that you can use in conjunction with that -- no publish service thing, is that you can have .desktop file overrides. If you want to run WiVRn from your graphical app launcher, you're not going to be able to add a command line option to it normally. However, if you copy the original .desktop file from where Flatpak puts it into your user's equivalent folder, you're not going to see 2 entries. You're going to see that any changes you make to the user one are the only thing that's shown for the app. It overrides any other things with that name. Because of that, I can copy the original .desktop file and just add -- no publish service to the end of the one in the user directory, and then if I search for WiVRn in my graphical app menu, it's just gonna launch with that option, and I don't have to worry about it, and I don't have duplicate options, which is really nice. Although Flatpak is my favorite method of installing things, and I think it's the best, it can be apparently kind of a hassle for development, and there are other reasons why you might prefer some other installation methods, so we'll get to those really quickly. First, there's Envision, which could actually be useful whether you want to use WiVRn or not, since it's just generally a manager of the open source Linux VR stack. You can manage WiVRn, but also if you had a Vive, you could manage stuff with it. You can manage all the different drivers that Monado has access to, and build different profiles so you can switch between stuff and test them without causing a bunch of issues. You can get it through your distro packages or as an app image. So Envision could be really useful if you would like to mess with the general VR software on your computer more, and if you don't want to be able to mess with those things, and also if you want to set up OpenComposite manually, you can just install WiVRn directly, also from your distro packages. In the same way that there's a bunch of extra software you can use to improve the SteamVR experience, which you can keep using with ALVR, you can do the same with Monado and WiVRn. It might be very visible software like WLX overlay S to get your virtual desktops, and you get a little watch on your arm, and you can overlay just a bunch of things. I think they've integrated, like, you can even have apps open in it now that aren't open on your general monitor. It's really cool. Or maybe more driver level software like SlimeVR support or Kinect support, though I think Kinect support is very experimental from what I've seen from other people using it. Or more frameworky type things that try to help you build XR experiences like Stardust XR. It's worth saying, even though I mentioned those in relation to Monado, because they're all like open source fun stuff, generally you should expect things to work between Monado and SteamVR the same. After all, they do both implement OpenXR, so ideally everything would be exactly the same between them, but in the real world, things can be a bit different, but it's mostly fine. The reason that there will be another ALVR video after this, because this is my first WiVRn video, but I've done a bunch of ALVR on Linux or Windows videos, is because SteamVR and ALVR itself has changed a lot since I last did those videos. So I feel like it's worth revisiting them. So like I said before, you can expect a video about that around the time ALVR's Steam release fully drops. And the final thing worth visiting that I'd somehow completely forgot to mention is the Linux VR Adventures Discord. It has tons of information, basically no matter what you're doing with VR on Linux. The LVRA Discord server is probably something that would be useful to you. You can also consider joining my own, but LVRA will be above my own in the description of this video. Or let's do another QR code. That was fun the last time I tried it. But the only thing I've got to cover right now, though, are my patrons, who hopefully aren't too angry about the fact that this was another video where, like, oh no, I've had to do tons of college work over the last month. Where have I been? I'm back. But I mean it, a huge thanks to Fluffy Meowl, Jack, Russell Willis, a new member, Novus4K, Pytech, and PT1997. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your patience, especially. And I would like to do more updates for you, so... But then whenever I message, people are like, no, I'm just here to like support. You don't have to worry too much about Patreon. So I appreciate that. But like, if you ever want anything to be posted to Patreon, let me know. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Please let me know what you think about the video in general, because obviously I always appreciate that. But especially let me know about the talking about the company, because I've just never done that before, and I really want to make sure that I do it right. And I know it was quite long this time, but that's because it was the first time and I wanted to explain it and things like that. So please let me know. Be very honest. Tell me what you really didn't like and tell me what you really did like. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.